Views and opinions expressed in this production are those of the individual and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Shooters Nation or our sponsors. Information provided on this show is not a replacement for legal counsel or professional training. Listener and viewer discretion is advised. This is especially true on live shows.
Welcome to the Shooters Nation podcast, the talk show for you, the armed citizen. Join us as we discuss guns and gear, training, mindset and knowledge, industry news and buzz, and of course, the firearms culture. Be sure to join us after the show at shootersnation.com and become part of the Shooters Nation.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Shooters Nation podcast. I'm your host, David Yancey, and I'm joined once again tonight by my co-host, Mark Lancaster of Squared Away Customs in New Hampshire. Mark, how's it going tonight?
Everything's going good. How about
Awesome.
yourself?
I can't complain. It's been a pretty busy day, and this is a little bit abnormal for us. We normally don't record on a Tuesday, but this episode still won't release until Sunday. But we've got a lot going on, and I appreciate you coming into this a little bit earlier than our normal schedule.
Yeah, anytime, no problem at all.
All right. Well, folks, this episode is going to take a little bit of a different format than our normal. There's a lot to cover, and this is a very serious and very timely subject. So I just want to get right to it. Our guest tonight currently serves as the director of security for a large church and their private school here in Middle Tennessee. The leadership team at his church was very supportive of him coming onto the show tonight to talk about certain things, but we all agreed that it would be best for him just to use his first name for the sake of this interview. This is partially for operational security and partially for the fact that while his church is happy for him to share information that they hope will make other congregations and schools safer, their true mission is not security for consultative purposes. Their true mission is to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ. So they're not in the security consulting business. With that said, I want to welcome William to the show. William, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, thanks, David. It's a great opportunity. I appreciate it. Thanks.
We really do appreciate you being here. William, is it okay if I just introduce you to our listeners and explain a little bit about your background?
Sure. Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. So, folks, William is he's the director of the campus security, as I described, for a very large church, 5,000 plus members, and a private school here in Middle Tennessee. His security career began with the U.S. Navy as a SEAL and a master EOD technician, or a bomb tech, for which he served 20 years in the services. Additionally, he was the vice president for security and emergency preparedness at the Los Angeles Dodgers for multiple seasons. He served as the deputy director for the largest regulatory program within the Department of Homeland Security, overseeing the security for over 450 federalized airports, and a firearms tactics instructor at the Institute of Police Science for the Metropolitan D.C. Police Department. William holds a Bachelor of Science in Aviation Management from Southern Illinois University. He was selected to pilot the first transportation leadership program in 2010 at the University of Southern California's Center for Risk and Economic Analysis of Terrorism events, and is a Certified Protection Professional, or a CPP, with the American Society for Industrial Security International. If you missed it, again, I just kind of want to go back. William is the technical term retired Navy SEAL.
Yeah, I guess we do. Yeah, we do eventually retire, but yeah, once a SEAL, always a SEAL for sure.
I kind of suspected that was a transformation that never left you. I've got several friends that are Marines, and the way that they remind me that they're either, that they're always once a Marine, always Marine, is either a pretty stern stare, maybe a grunt, or a slap upside the head. So any of those are acceptable forms of communication back with me to remind me that you are still a Navy SEAL. So thank you for being here. I'm excited to talk with you. I think that you've got a mountain of knowledge to share. And again, this is a pretty timely conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, it sure is.
So, Mark, I'm sure as you've looked through the preliminary notes for our discussion tonight, our core conversation is going to be making our schools safer. And William, when you and I were first introduced to one another, our original thought was for you to come on to the podcast and talk about church security, since that's a thing that you do on a daily basis as well. And then the Santa Fe, Texas school shooting happened just recently. And yeah, you graciously agreed to shift gears and for us to spend this time together talking about how we can make our schools safer. And hopefully in a week or two, we can come back together and do that episode on church security, provided that you're still available to us.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Sure.
Fantastic. Well, so folks, let me just set the stage. As an opening point, in Western society, our children are our greatest asset, in my opinion at least. They're our future. We value them, or we should, more than anything else that we've been given on this earth. And yet, it seems that we generally protect them at school pretty poorly. It might also be important to note that some of what we discuss tonight will be easier to facilitate and achieve for private schools. There are more restrictions, regulations, and I would call them political hoops to jump through for public schools. But that doesn't necessarily mean that situation is hopeless or impossible. It just means that you'll have to work harder to bring change in a public school setting. William, if I could just ask an opening question of you. The recent surge of school shootings, what's going on? Why is this becoming so common?
Yeah, that's a very complicated question, and there's multiple answers. But there's some things that are going on. Some are tangible, some are intangible. Unfortunately, the crux and the foundation of why these are occurring, and there's an uptick now. 22 shootings in 20 weeks, first 20 weeks of 2018. It's a combination of our society now glorifying violence, and we do that in a myriad of ways. I won't go into all those ways, but there's various products that do that. The arts, music, that's all part of it. I think the other thing that's going on now too is based on how the media reports these incidents. An incident can be, based on its reporting, can be inspirational to would-be perpetrators. And that's another aspect of this, where the media is glorifying the villain. Sometimes they don't mean to do it, but they're giving these folks way too much airtime. And that's another part of it. Some of the intangibles, though, which we just briefly discussed, is in the early '60s. You might remember we removed the Bible, prayer, essentially God, out of the public school system, and the latent effects of that, which have been mounting, are playing all into this. The fatherlessness rate is endemic in this country, along with the erosion of the family unit. So all that's going on, social disconnection with the younger generation, where everything's a fixation on phones and video games and electronics, and they're becoming more socially disconnected. And I think that's all playing into putting these young folks in a very hopeless situation. There's a lot of psychology and other elements that go into this, but I think that's just some of the things that are contributory to what's going on here.
I would agree with you. My wife is very quick to say often that when you remove the moral authority there are no morals. And it seems like you're right. In the past few decades, we've done exactly that. And here in the South, we have a saying that the chickens have come home to roost, and it feels like maybe that's what we're seeing.
Yeah, there's no doubt.
Why do you think our schools are still soft targets? Why are these attacks still successful?
Well, I think that, let's face it, the attacks are successful because the environment's very porous. There's multiple entry points. People come and go as they choose. It's pretty tough when you have multiple entry points and only one SRO in the public school system, school resource officer, to cover multiple entrance points and discriminate the environment. It's just impossible to do. So it's a very fluid environment where you try to. I know every day it's a daily chore where you lock down a school. Is in the private school setting, you'll lock down the school, but a rock propping open a door compromises all the integrity that you've worked so hard to put into the place. So that's the physical environment. The other side of this is that there needs to be a culture developed where security is everybody's responsibility. So every student, every teacher, and everyone has an awareness, Colonel Cooper developed the color code system,
right?
Where so everyone has an awareness. Nobody's in white. Everybody's at least in yellow, and they have that awareness, and it's everybody's responsibility. So that's a constant, ongoing chore. Maybe poor choice of words, but it's something that you're always trying to achieve inside your environment. I know I'm trying to do that in the private school environment always.
You mentioned Colonel Jeff Cooper's color code chart, and it's his awareness color code chart. So for the listeners, the chart essentially goes like this. There are 4 colors. White is the lowest level. You're switched off. You're unaware of what's going on around you, and you're really not ready for anything. Yellow, which is what Williams suggested that we probably all ought to be in, especially in that setting where we're trying to protect an asset, and that asset being our children. You're alert and you're aware, but you're also calm and relaxed. You're not on edge. You're just paying attention to what's going on in your surroundings. And then it escalates from there to orange, where there's a heightened level of awareness, and red, where that's actually when the fight occurs. William, do you think that Colonel Cooper ever imagined that yellow would become the new white?
Yeah, no. I mean, his color code was developed for combat readiness, for your soldiers in the field, Marines, soldiers in the field, and there's no way. But again, we are the soldiers now. We
Sure.
are the. Yeah.
Well, am I crazy? Am I being dramatic about that when I say that yellow is the new white? Because it really seems like the current events have sort of mandated that we now put ourselves in that heightened level of awareness where we're still calm, we're not on edge. We're paying acute attention to what's going on around us. That seems like that's the new normal if we want to be safe. Or am I going to fatigue myself, and are our listeners going to fatigue themselves if they try to stay in yellow all the time?
Yeah, no, I don't think you have any choice. I think you outside of being in the living room of your own home, and some would disagree with me even on that. I mean, you're always in yellow.
Mark, you're probably like me. You probably keep a firearm within close reach even at home, don't you?
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
I got a question for you. William, do you think that there will ever be a time when the media, I mean, are we going to get far enough into this and it's going to be frequent enough that the conversation is about something other than the gun and what we can do, like on a mass conversation, to help secure our kids?
Yeah, you know what, Mark? I wish there would come a day, but I just don't know. You know, the political system is so broken, and people our representatives have just lost their way. So they latch on to something tangible. And again, guns is the absolute low-hanging fruit in this scenario. But because you can touch them, you can point to them, I think they're going to, I don't foresee a time when they're going to let go of that. And again, for me, I always use the parallel. It's like, trying to get rid of or eradicate guns from a society like ours is like cutting the horns off an antelope and telling it that the lion's really not going to, the lion's going to go away and he's really never going to attack again.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. And so, again, nobody wants to, we just mentioned a few of the intangibles. Nobody wants to address those because they don't have solutions for those, because they think we're too far down the road. And we're really not. We're really not too far down the road, but we got to get people in the right people in the right places in our government, that have this type of principled thinking, so we can turn things around.
And I think another big part of it is the media, not only the government, but the media spewing their agenda rather than what could actually make a difference. And I mean, you just hope that eventually, it's not only frustrating to me as a gun owner because you're going after my rights, but it's frustrating me that you have such a huge audience and you could be using it for something good. Like,
yeah, absolutely,
some simple and basic things that you could be doing to protect these schools and protect these schools.
Yeah.
And they're just not using that microphone as well as they could be. And at some points you would think enough children, would, become victims, and they would finally, turn an eye to this and say, we really should maybe talk about something that's going to actually help them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I hope there comes a day, but again, it's like the government. I think we got to get some new people behind the microphones on our media segments before that happens.
Mark, you kind of read my mind. I was thinking that what we seem to miss as a society, as we're going after these hot button, feel good, tangible symbols, if you will. It's a symbol. It's not going to actually change anything, in my opinion, if you ban guns, because the people that will have them are still the people that were willing to break the law anyway. But we need to focus on doing something effective and meaningful. And William, let me ask this as my next question. Tell me if I'm right or wrong, but it seems like maybe there's two primary issues at play currently if you were to try to divide them into two neat categories. And the first one is the motive of the current batch of attackers. And the second would be the safety and security issues that seem to be just not very well addressed in our schools presently. Do you agree or disagree with that, or is that too simplistic?
No, I mean, the first one, the motives, let's face it, the pathway of violence always starts with a grievance. And even during the course of the Santa Fe shooting that was unfolding, there was a media outlet that was quick to say that there was really nothing telling in the background regarding this individual, Demetrius, and that wasn't the truth at all. I mean, there's always something stewing in the background. You know what's interesting? The U.S. Department of Education and the United States Secret Service published a final report. It was called the Safe School Initiative. This is back in 2002, and they had 10 key findings inside that final report, and those 10 things are the same things that plague us today. They've never changed, and that's a dated document. It's fairly dated.
It almost seems then that we're focusing on the wrong thing as a society, and we're being willfully led along by the media and our elected representatives, perhaps, to focus on an agenda item that people are capitalizing on these bad events to try to push. And that agenda item, in my opinion, is firearms. And I don't know. It could be for a variety of reasons. It's very easy to say that, well, you've got people that have an agenda that they just want to see people disarmed, perhaps to subjugate the citizenry. And that I don't know. That's hard to prove until it happens. They might be pushing that agenda item because some of them earnestly believe that if you get rid of the tool, then the person is now incapable of doing harm. And we've seen that that's not true. We've seen pressure cookers used as weapons in Boston. We've seen cars and trucks used as weapons in the United States and across the world. We've seen fertilizer used to level buildings and kill hundreds. We've seen airplanes used to fly into buildings and kill thousands. It seems like that. I'm going to perhaps use a term that might be uncomfortable for some of our listeners, if depending on where they come from in life, but we have a heart issue as far as the motives go, and we're trying to take away items and legislate evil out of a person's intent, and a person who's intent on doing evil could do it with the coffee cup that's sitting in front of me, perhaps, to one person at least.
Right. It's like it's similar to terrorism. So terrorism is a product of intentions, not means. Because if my intention's strong enough, I'll find the means to be successful in the attack. And so that's what's happening here. They focus on the means, the gun, but you're right. It could be a knife, a grenade, a pressure cooker, a vehicle, and because that's the path of least resistance, and that's what's going to make the news the quickest, because they can tangibly talk about that. You have to have smart, wise, and settled people who can talk about the intangibles, and then not only talk about them, but talk about next steps, some of the things we need to do. I think we'll be talking about some of those things as we get further into the program. But I think the other thing that we have in response to the second point you brought up, just the safety and security issues that seem to not be very well attended or addressed. In the school system, we've created a culture around fire life safety, but yet there hasn't been a catastrophic fire in a school since 1958. But yet you have to do a fire drill every month. You got fire alarms and smoke alarms and fire trucks and fire hydrants, and everything's fire related. And that was a culture that was developed over a century ago.
Yeah, even a bus.
And then 40 years later, Columbine happens, and that's a benchmark incident. It's foundational in changing the tactics for law enforcement. But yet, we still haven't created the culture that's needed to deal with the current threat in a preventionary and protection-oriented way. So there's a new culture needed, and there's just a lot of folks in the environment that don't know what that means. I mean, what does that look like? What does that culture look like? So hopefully we'll be talking about some of that stuff.
Absolutely will. I I want to pause for a moment and just explain one thing for our listeners. I'm going to give myself a free pass to be a little bit more opinionated tonight than I normally am. And so I'm both going to be asking questions and also maybe offering opinion. And William and Mark both, please feel free to counter any of that and help me think through it, because I believe that our listeners they're opinionated. They have thoughts. I know they do. I know that this is a passionate subject for a lot of them, and that passion also comes from angst and worry and concern for their own kids. So, being a little bit opinionated at the moment, it seems to me that as a culture, we need to come to terms with the fact that, unlike a fire, which has no intent, it's a natural phenomena that happens somewhat at random. We know that there are things that contribute to causing a fire to erupt, but a fire doesn't have malice. An attacker does, and that's an uncomfortable thing to acknowledge, that there are people in this society, our civilized Western culture, who just want to kill you and hurt you and take things away from you, including the lives of your children, even though they don't know you. And that's a scary thought for people to come to terms with. And I think that is part of the culture shift that we need to experience as a society, is to quit putting our heads in the sand and saying that legislating away things and rights will somehow change the fact that evil walks amongst us and is trying to do us harm. Am I crazy?
No, I think you're spot on. And unfortunately, and not trying to be a fear monger, it's not going to get better, because the thing's not the thing. So the thing the media is reporting, that's not the thing. The thing is what we're talking about. The erosion of our country, the moral principles, and the erosionary process that's found its way inside the family unit, and the numerous byproducts of all that. Now that's been sowed into. We reap what we sow.
Right.
It's a principle. It's a law. You can't violate it. You just prove that it works.
Right.
You do violate it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we've done really well as a society of taking morality and ethics and the source of morality for so many people out of our society, out of our government, out of our schools, out of our lives. And we've told everybody that I'm okay, you're okay. You can be whoever you want to be and act however you want to act. And we've completely taken apart the thing that was the common denominator for this is acceptable behavior and this is not. And now right is right, wrong is right. Sometimes right is wrong. If you listen to the general status quo of things, what used to be right, traditional, is now that's a bad word. Traditional values are sneered at, and I think that you're right. We're reaping what we've sown, and it will only get worse unless we try to steer back to this is acceptable behavior and this is not. Airing grievances, one-on-one in a conversation or an argument, or out on the playground with fists, the way that kids used to do, that is more acceptable than coming to school with a gun or improvised explosives and trying to kill everybody because you're unhappy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we are going to talk about the things that we can do to try to make our schools safer. I think it was just important for me to get that out on the front end and talk about some of the motives. And I have a feeling we'll come back to the motives. That's a common thread that will come back perhaps even as an explanation for why we take certain security steps. It looks like we've probably got about 10, 12 minutes in remaining in this first segment. So let me just skip right in. When we think about security, William, where does that start? Is there a method or a recipe, or are there, in my layman's terms, are there rings or layers to security? And maybe I'm thinking, do we start with awareness? I don't know. You tell me. You're the Navy SEAL with experience in terrorism, and I think we're safe calling a school shooting perpetrated by a student is a terrorist act. Mm-hmm. Where does security start?
Yeah. So here's where it really starts, and this is really anything, security anywhere, your home, a corporation, a school, a church. So what you initially do, you start with an assessment. So my philosophy and approach, it's not new, but it's assess, plan, train. So three components. And so the first component here, assess. So you assess your weaknesses and vulnerabilities. You look at what those are, and then you look at ways that you can shore those up. Now, the other three components, I like to work in threes because you can remember things in threes, is people, process, and technology. So when I look at each vulnerability or weakness in my operation, I look at how can people help reduce this vulnerability? How can process reduce this vulnerability? How can technology help to reduce this vulnerability? And that's helped me. I use that. I use that every day.
Okay.
And so I think you do a threat and vulnerability assessment, a risk assessment, and then inside that, you're going to look for no cost, minimum cost, or large cost solutions that may involve people, process, or technology. So it's like for example, you look at a school and maybe their check-in process is weak, how they check people in, how they check visitors in. And so you can develop, probably in a lot of cases, or in my experience, you can develop a process at no cost just by developing an effective process that vets visitors. Who's coming in through your doors, and you have a written record. You have things in place to make sure that people coming into your environment that aren't normally there are properly vetted. So, just for an example.
Here's an example that was provided by one of our listeners earlier. She said, I can walk into any school with flowers and no one turns a head or asks a question. She owns a florist, by the way. Mm-hmm. She said that 4 days after the school shooting in her part of the country, Western Kentucky, she walked through the doors of the school with flowers and never was questioned about any of it. And she said that even still on top of that their courthouse has 4 to 6 armed security people at all times. And as a contrast, they'll take the flowers from her, even though they see her walk in week after week with flowers on a delivery, and they inspect them and then they hand them back to her, and they want to know who's getting these flowers. So you have a school that just went through a shooting and she walks straight through the door unchallenged with flowers in her hands, and everybody looks and says, oh, I know so-and-so. But you go to the courthouse where they take security a little bit more seriously, and they have a program. They have a process according to your set of threes, and they say, okay, hand over the flowers. Let's look through them. Where are these going? Is that a pretty good comparison? Do we need to start looking at that kind of process in our schools, that we aren't complacent, that we've seen you day after day after day? What's in the backpack? What's in that case? Should we spot check? What how do you think that plays into the process part of security.
Yeah, again, in the school environment, it gets extremely complicated. So you have Mr. Smith who comes through the door and says, "I want to pick up Johnny," and he's on the list to pick up Johnny. But last night there was an order of protection issued against him, but nobody called the school. So now he picks up Johnny, and he's on his way. So that's not far-fetched. That's not far-fetched. Or worse than that, Mr. Smith comes to pick up Johnny, and he had an order of protection issued against him, but now him and his wife are working things out, and the order of protection's been lifted, but you've already called law enforcement because you believe he's violated his order of protection. Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying?
Sure.
I mean, it's a very complicated. It can be very complicated at the entrance of a school. There's a lot going on. It's very dynamic. But I'll tell you, here's how our visitor check-in works.
Okay.
A visitor comes in and says, "I want to see Mr. Smith." Mr. Smith's called, and we already have the name of the visitor, the visiting party, and we say who they are. They're here to see you, and if our person, Mr. Smith, if he doesn't acknowledge, I don't have an appointment with them. We ask him to leave the building.
Okay.
So we vet. People are vetted initially at the entrance, and again, we do that. We actually have what's called it's one of our physical security barriers inside our entrance. We have a man trap. So we'll let you inside the door, but you can't get inside the building. And we can see you, we can see everything about your person, and you convey that information to us, and then we vet that information before we ever let you in the building.
Is somebody in that man trap with them, or are they there behind? Okay.
Nope. They're there by themselves.
Okay. So
yeah.
This is good. You're making me think about things, and I love it.
But you could do that with a video annunciator. Okay. On the front steps. So you wouldn't need the man trap. You need the video annunciator. If they're too close to the camera, sir, could you back up for the camera and turn around for me so I can see what's on your person? Are you holding a bag? That kind of thing. So you don't have to have, because I know maybe you have some listeners going, "Oh my gosh, I gotta go into some big construction project, develop an extra entrance so I can contain these people," and that's not really the case. I mean, there is technology. Again, people process technology, right? There's some great technology out there that can help you out.
So, William, let's just say that I'm on the school board, or I'm on the administration board for whatever, or I don't know, I'm somebody in authority, and you're talking to me about these security mechanisms that we can put in place. And we talk about that you want to pre-screen a person before they come into the building. And you've just described what you have. And I look at you and I say, wow, that seems terribly rude that you would not allow a person to come in and speak with them. This isn't a prison. How do you answer that? Because I think about those kinds of responses and think, oh my gosh, maybe politeness is part of our downfall. What do you say?
Yeah, no, again, security is never convenient, and politeness, just like I've told girls, I teach a security awareness and self-defense course to 4th and 5th graders, 6th graders, 7th graders. And I tell the girls in particular, I say, nice is a strategy. There are no nice guys. Nice is a strategy. It's
a mean sunny end. Yeah.
I think we have to get past ourselves and realize that security is one of the things I said a few minutes ago was we have to get past the old culture that's been developed. I mean, it's not business as usual. I mean, you have to come into your school, and you have to start thinking, wow, if this was today, what would I do based on where I'm at and the kids that are around me? And so again, you're in yellow, and you can't afford to leave that. You can't afford to leave it. So I again, if I was talking to a school board member, I would say, I would probably ask if they realize what happened in Santa Fe, Texas, just a week ago, and just bring that to their attention, and let alone 22 incidents in 20 weeks.
Right.
We need a better way to vet visitors and people who are visiting our campus. So, again, I think there are ways to do that. And again, I think current events are helping those conversations immensely. Unfortunately, it is unfortunate, but I think people who weren't willing to involve themselves in those conversations are now saying, I have to get involved in these conversations.
Hindsight is such a terrible thing, and it's an item that we don't have a luxury for anymore, it seems like. I've heard, to your point about politeness and nice being a strategy, I've heard firsthand accounts of people being interviewed by the media after a home invasion or a carjacking or a rape. And several of these instances started with a person knocked at a door and the homeowner opened the door to ask, may I help you? Or they were told, oh, my car's broken down, can I borrow your phone? And the next thing you know, several people are rushing into the house and the homeowner is beaten, robbed, or somebody dies. Carjacking, same thing. Somebody taps on the window, hey buddy, can you spare a dollar? And the next thing you know, a gun or a knife is in your face, you're being forced out of your car. Things go badly for you. Woman walking down the sidewalk, hey, can you help me? I'm looking for my dog. And she comes over to look at what she thinks is a flyer of a dog. And the next thing you know, she's being shoved in an alley or into a car or something like that. And she's being raped. And to a person, it seems like every interview about that, if they ask the question, what could you have done differently? What do you wish you had done differently or changed to avoid this? They would have said, I wish I hadn't opened the door or rolled down my window or gone to that person and asked, what? And so hindsight, and it all starts, I think, with being nice. And I'll just say, as we're about to head into break, if you're listening, I'm going to challenge you, change your mindset. Our world is not the idyllic place that it was. It's not a utopia. We don't live in the Leave It to Beaver society of the 1950s where you could leave your house doors unlocked at night, et cetera. We have danger present in our country, and it's going after our kids in places. And if a question of what's your business here? Who are you talking? Who are you trying to talk to? Who do you want to see? What's in the box? What's in the bag you're carrying? Hey, what's under that trench coat? If that could save lives and undo something like Santa Fe, wouldn't you want to ask the question, even if it seemed a little bit rude, if it could save lives and undo all that? Mark, I see you leaning in. You look like you've got a thought.
Just last week before we recorded the podcast, I was at my daughter's school concert. And a new policy that they started. Well, they started a few last year. It's an elementary school, K through 5. And when you approach the door to get in the school during non-school hours, they're all locked. There's a camera. You have to buzz. They ask you who you are, what you're there for, so on and so forth, and then they let you in. But now, when there is a concert, nobody's allowed in until exactly 15 minutes before the concert starts. And then the doors are unlocked and then everybody rolls in. So there's obviously a line of, I don't know how many hundreds of parents there are, but, a line all up and down the sidewalk, 4 wide for quite some ways. And as I'm standing in this line patiently, just waiting to get in, understanding exactly what it's for, and seeing that it's thinking that it's well worth it in my mind for any added security just would be best. All I could hear were parents complaining that they couldn't get in early, that they couldn't get in and get their seats, and they don't understand what they're doing, and this is a ridiculous rule, and on and on and on and on. And it's like I tend not to open my mouth in a situation like that. I just keep to myself, and you just keep complaining, and I just take it in and thinking, like, are they not thinking of why, or are they just complainers? Like, what is it? But it's good to me. It feels good to see them taking steps, even up here in New England, which is one of the complaints. Like, we came to New England so we didn't have to deal with this. It's just
it's everywhere though. Yeah,
absolutely. And I've said it before on here. I've said it in social media. Like, every single victim in one of these shootings, or families of a victim in one of these shootings at one point in time, said it's never going to happen to them.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Every single one of them, I bet, or at least thought it. And I think that you need to you gotta have your eyes open.
I agree. Okay. So, listeners, we're at the middle point here. We're going to break, and we'll play a lovely commercial that will soothe your ears, and then we'll be back. William, when we come back, where would you like to pick up? I've got a thought. I can offer a suggestion, or I'd like to know maybe where you would like to head with the conversation next.
No, that's great. Offer up.
Okay.
Where do you want to go?
Well, it seems like we're kind of headed towards the subject of improving or creating a security program with your school. So I would like to know what your thoughts are about how you can start making that conversation happen with the administration, and maybe some strategies for getting buy-in, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
That'd be great. Yep, sure.
Cool. Well, let's do that. Folks, we're going to break, and we'll be right back with you. Please stay tuned. Hey folks, David here. By now, regular listeners of the show are well acquainted with Mark and our friends over at Squared Away Customs. You already know that they are a manufacturer of high-quality custom Kydex holsters and carry gear for civilians, military, and law enforcement. But what you might not know is that Squared Away Customs is also your one-stop source for weapon-mounted lights and other firearms accessories. Mark, Corey, and the gang are now also stocking dealer for Polymer 80 frames and slides, and of course, have holsters to fit. What is Polymer 80, you ask? They are 80% complete polymer frames that you finish out with Glock pistol components. Because you're building it, there's no serial number, no FFL required, and no registration needed. It's a great way to build a custom Glock-style pistol of your own creation. Squared Away Customs offers Polymer 80 frames compatible with Glock model 17, 19, 22, 23, 26, 27, 34, and 35 Generation 3 components. They come in 2 different grip styles and include features like an extended beaver tail, double undercut trigger guard, and a thumb ledge already built in. So, if you're looking for the next level of customization and performance from the Glock platform, head over to squaredawaycustoms.com and check out their Polymer 80 accessories and, of course, their Squared Away Customs Polymer 80 custom holsters today. Everybody, welcome back. This is David, Shooters Nation Podcast. We're here, Mark Lancaster from Squared Away Customs up in New Hampshire, but we also have William, a veteran U.S. Navy SEAL and current Director of Safety and Security for a very large church congregation and private school here in the Middle Tennessee area. William has graciously agreed to share some of his knowledge and expertise with us in the pursuit of helping us all make schools a little bit safer. William, thanks again for being with us tonight. Before we broke, we said that we were going to talk about the subject of how do you broach improving or creating a security program with your school administration. And I would ask, do you start at PTO meetings or meetings with elected representatives? How would you do that?
Yeah, David, I think it's good to start internally. So gain some steam inside your own organization everybody recognizing the challenge, at the same time understanding that this is a comprehensive safety and security program with an all hazards approach. So it's not just the active threat. So it's earthquakes and tornadoes and CPR, cardiac arrest, first aid, gas leaks. So and along with the active threat. So you kind of have these natural and man-made disasters or incidents inside the all hazards umbrella. And I think that's a good way to internalize your program. Remember, I said we're gonna assess, then we're gonna plan, and part of that plan is a comprehensive emergency management plan, and then we're gonna train. So we'll take pieces and parts of that plan, and we'll train to that plan. And so, implementing that plan or developing that plan inside your organization, everybody understands what needs to be done. You understand, and you have an alliance of people inside your organization. So when you go outside or you go up the chain, up to additional leadership, or PTO or any other organization that you have to give an account to, I think you have a better chance of winning them over to the direction that you want to go.
So it sounds to me like, if I could paraphrase, if you approach this from a comprehensive safety program perspective, and the security, the active shooter or the active attacker response is just an element of it, that is a little bit more palatable sometimes to the people that are in a position to vote yay or nay. Okay. Mark?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Mark, I'm watching you and it looks like maybe you're leaning in for a thought there. What have you got?
I agree. I was just absolutely agreeing with what you were saying. I think you're exactly on point.
Okay. All right. So, William, you've got your alliance of people that you've already spoken with, and it's like-minded individuals. Maybe it's parents, maybe it's teachers, maybe it's even the genesis of that is with the students, and they come to the parents and teachers and say, "Hey, look, we would really like to be safe here. Not necessarily feel safe, but be safe. Can you please do something about it?" And then the parents and the teachers start working together to come up with some sort of a plan to present to the leadership to get buy-in and approval. Are current events making this conversation any easier? What's your experience with some of the other, either personally, William, or in some of your peers in the industry? Are the terrible things that are happening in the news right now making that conversation any easier to have with the people who can vote to fund it or vote to keep it out?
Yeah, there's no doubt. Absolutely. And obviously the other thing that's helping is everybody's got an iPhone. So everybody's getting these news alerts. I mean, just seconds, if not minutes after something happens, this stuff is blowing up your phone or your iPad or some electronic device. And so there's not too many people that don't know what's going on as far as the recent incidents regarding, in this case, school shootings.
Right. So we mentioned a comprehensive safety program, and I know you had kind of an itemized list there that you went through. If you were to describe the ideal safety program for an institution like a school, what are components of that including the security aspect of it, but what are the components of that make the most sense to an organization to outline as saying, okay, this is the punch list of things that we want to address when we form this program?
Yeah. I think it's again, when you look at the all hazards list of items, I think you got to look at the things that could occur. It really depends on the part of the country you're living in. But just for example, so natural hazards could include earthquakes, severe weather, which includes tornadoes, floods, extreme temperatures, lightning, technological hazards. So power failure. If you have a power failure.
Okay.
Biological hazards. So infectious diseases. So if you had an infectious disease, do you know how to get a hold of the CDC? Do you know how to, so there's other things. And of course you have the human caused or adversarial, incidents, which, bomb threats, we're talking about the active shooter, active killer, type of incident. But let's face it, cyber attacks are huge. Those are going to become more common, and they are going to hit closer to home more frequently. The child abduction, medical emergency. So I think all these things, again, I kind of class two classes, natural and man-made.
Okay.
I think you look at the part of the country you're in, look at the ones that could affect you there. And, of course, some of these affect you regardless of what part of the country you're in. But, and then, like the way I develop my plan is for each one of those incidents, I have a preparation, response, and recovery element or component attached to each one of those. Because what you're not seeing, and Mark made light of this on the break, is these incidents now, like Santa Fe, Texas, you don't even hear about it anymore.
Yeah, the media's kind of the media seems like they're done with it now. It's almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what you don't see is the, if you just play in your mind how to reunify children to parents, and then how you're going to process the casualties, where you're going to set up a CP for emergency responders when they come to your property. All that has to be dealt with. So one of your former questions was like, what's the first thing you do? You do an assessment. And by the way, we were talking about no cost solutions. Some of the things you can do at no cost. We'll probably be talking more about these things, but a local law enforcement agency, I would venture to say any local law enforcement agency in the country would be more than happy to do a threat assessment at a school property.
Well,
for free.
Let's head straight into low cost or no cost ways to start or improve a security program at your school or a safety program at your school. Then, so I'm the president or whatever of the school board, and I say, William, you're absolutely right. We need a safety program for our schools. The first thing, because of the media right now, William, I think that we need to have a security regimen or a security protocol for our schools. How would you start there with low cost or no cost to make the security in the school better?
Again, I would initially start with an assessment. Okay. So assess, plan, train. So I start with an assessment. I'd ask my local law enforcement agency if I couldn't do that myself. If you don't have the skill to do that, anyone who's listening, if you don't feel you have the skill to do that, there are companies that will do that, but your local law enforcement agency, they will come in and do that for free, and they'll give you a written report, which is great to have because you can look at the weaknesses and vulnerabilities that they come up with, and a lot of times they come up with solutions of how to reduce or eliminate those vulnerabilities. And that document becomes invaluable to you. I think the other thing that's key is to periodically do a security awareness and threat identification brief. So we've all heard the see something, say something
Yes, sir.
And that's become very cliche. It's like, what am I looking for? And we all know that we see what we're prepared to see. So you have to tell people what to look for.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to tell people how to report when you see something that looks out of place. How do you report that? Where do you report that to? And that would be part of a security awareness brief. So that brief done periodically. So you do it at the beginning of the school year, maybe after Christmas break, and then maybe after spring break, however you want to do that. But that's helping you create that culture, that mindset of awareness that you want to have in everyone that works on your campus or attends your campus. So a student or a staff, we include our students in our drill. So an AED drill, include your students in non-threatening drills, like an AED drill, where they have to go get the AED, which means they have to know where that thing's at. And so, you may end up kind of taking a break in the drill and taking the whole class to go get the AED, bringing it back, and then showing how it's administered. But in that process, you're building trust relationships with those kids. So they're going, wow, I mean, I didn't know how to do this. Now I know how to do this. Now, when you go into code red drills, when you're dealing with an active threat, when it's time to lock down and cut the lights and the noise level needs to go to 0 and folks silence their phones, that happened.
The kids are learning that they are an active participant in their safety. Yeah.
They're part of the solution.
That's fantastic. And it seems so simple. And yet when you laid it out like that, it was just very clear to me. We've talked about becoming more observant and aware, and not just in the sense of if you see something, say something, but actively aware in the moment of what's going on. I've been watching the news post Santa Fe, and it seems like some of the facts are starting to come out that perhaps the shooter was motivated by an obsession with a girl. And the girl reportedly warned her parents that she was worried and even joked that, quote unquote, if he kills me, I'm coming back to haunt him. How closely do parents need to watch for this sort of thing? And is there some sort of a protocol that could be implemented for reporting this kind of stuff, so that people who say or do the wrong things are intercepted before violence occurs?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, being preemptive in any of these areas is a good thing. It's especially when it comes to this type of threat, the active killer threat. So there are solutions that can help with the reporting process. So here's the dilemma that we've found, in that we're finding, and others know this too, working in the school environment, is when it comes to students, nobody wants to be a snitch. Nobody wants to tell on their friends, or even if it's not their friend, they don't want to be don't want to be deemed or labeled a snitch. So there is an app out there. It's called stopitsolutions.com. You can go to the website, and the folks that manage the system are awesome, very extremely helpful. But what this allows a student to do, and so you do this. So here's the other great thing about this: you're getting the parents involved. So you're showing the parents, hey, we're proactive. We want to know we know we don't know everything going on behind the scenes inside of all the families represented at this school. I mean, you can imagine There's just no way to know that. But we think that we can do a better job at making sure students have the liberty to report anomalies in behavior that's unbecoming of somebody's persona just overnight, where Johnny now is talking about violence and some very dark stuff, and he was never like that. But we know that his parents are going through a nasty divorce, and and there's all these things that are playing into this. And so when a student sees this, now they have a way to autonomously report the behavior, and there's total autonomy. We can't find out who reported the information.
Oh, wow. So it's anonymous. It's not like if Sally reports Johnny that Johnny's going to know that Sally did it. You guys don't even know it.
We don't even know it. Nope. And that's just the way that's the way the system's set up. And so one of the challenges I had, or one of the devil's advocate components I had against the system initially, was false reporting.
I was just thinking about that.
And so that's easily, a person that you identify as false reporting, they're just trying to, they have a bent towards somebody, and they're trying to get back at them.
Sure.
And they're going to use this to do that. You can block them from the system.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you can mute them. Yeah.
So, absolutely. So because they discredit the program. So there's ways of doing it. And so when you do that, that quickly goes away. That quickly subsides. So there are solutions. The reporting side of this is huge. It's a large component, because I talked about that Safe Schools initiative. The 10 key findings. One of the, well, actually there was a couple of the findings that were tied into this, but one of the findings was there was almost always other students involved in some capacity in the pre-attack plan.
That's interesting.
And then prior to the incident, other people, i.e. students, knew about the attacker's plans, or at least his idea for the plan. But most of the perps are males, so that's why I'm saying he. But
well, that is huge, because it seems like a common theme is that the clues or signs were all there ahead of time, and yet they just didn't go. They didn't go report it, or they weren't acted on, or somebody thought it was too insignificant, or if I say it, people think I'm paranoid or whatever. This allows, there's a concept in it's information technology. I think it started out with, but now it's in all sorts of entrepreneurial areas, but it's considered crowdsourcing. And it seems like what you're essentially doing there is you're allowing an anonymous yet responsible way to crowdsource the intelligence that the leadership needs to make good decisions about issues before they become significant or violent. That's cool.
Yep.
That's really cool.
Yep. So this stop at solutions, it becomes a powerful deterrent. And so you'll have, if somebody wanted to do something bad, at least it's going to make them think twice before making a bad decision.
Sure. Well, that is really cool. All right. Well, I'm going to make sure that I drop that in our show notes so that our listeners can find the address and go research that, because that sounds like, to me, that's like a no-brainer unless it's some extremely expensive thing. And I really, even if it is, can you put a price on that sort of intelligence that would help you avoid a critical incident like that? Mark, did you have any questions or thoughts on this before we move to another item?
Yeah, I mean, how do you know if your school is connected to it, and if they are? I mean, what if your school doesn't have like a security team? Would it then just go to like principal, or how? Do you know how that works?
Okay, so are you referring to? So there's not a dedicated security person at the school?
Yeah,
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Yeah, I would go right to the leadership. I mean, you'd have to deal directly with the leadership. If there's not a person, and sometimes you'll have again, the terms safety and security are they're almost synonymous. They're used interchangeably. So sometimes you don't have a security person, you have more of a safety person, and that person's for the longest time has been, maybe tied into more conventional first aid, and even I think this person probably has a connection to the building and facilities side of the house. So that person might be a good first step, but if they quickly wave off, I mean, I would go to the top and I would deal directly with the principal.
Okay, and I guess Mark, your other question was, how would you know if your school is a participant in that program? William, is that just something that schools generally would advertise as part of their news publications to the students and the parents?
Yeah, well, I think as a school identifies this as an enhancement, something that they want, then they would go ahead and get the parents, because you have to get the parents involved. I mean, you're putting an app on a student's phone,
sure,
and so you have to get the parents involved along with the students. So
okay.
But as far as this is a private thing. I went to a private school security working group meeting several months back, and this was again, we all talk about kind of what we're doing, what we're up against. We're all up against the same things, and this was thrown out as, hey, this is something that we're researching right now. It seems like a good viable program, and it's got great ratings. They had talked to schools who already had it in place, and the results were amazing. So we thought this is great, and the cost it's actually incredibly low.
It's really easy to find in the Apple App Store, and if you just go Google "Stop It" solution, "Stop It" is all one word. You're going to find it. It's kind of funny. Just as an aside, one of the negative reviews on the app was somebody saying, just what you were talking about a moment ago. Oh, well, you can use this to bully people by reporting falsely. And the app developer responded in that review on the Apple App Store and countered it with the facts of, no, you really can't. And so, folks, when you're listening, if you go to this and you look at it, you go, oh my gosh, it's got a negative review. I wouldn't be deterred. Really dig into it. Just remember that anybody and everybody can leave a review for anything. And, the same people that, are going to complain about exemplary service at a restaurant just because they didn't get their croutons served a certain way, they can leave a negative review on an app too. So dig in deeper. Don't just follow the herd mentality here. Look into it. I'm going to. This is fantastic. Okay. So we've got about 20 minutes left, it seems like, and I know that to me that I just know that that's going to pass by in the blink of an eye. So let me ask another question. People, how do I want to phrase this? Are there ways for a school to implement security without looking like they're implementing security? And I was going to say that people seem really worried about the appearance of physical security for some reason. I would think that we could all three agree that your priorities are maybe they need to be recalibrated. But you hear that claim a lot. We don't want to send our kids to prisons. But at the same time, we want them safe, right? So, are there any places to start there where it's secure, but it's not in your face? And I know you've kind of touched on that with the idea of a bit of a stopgap before you just allow somebody admittance into the building. But what else is something that could be done in a kind of unobtrusive, not in your face way to tighten up security at a school?
Yeah, so just a real simple solution is signage.
Okay.
So having a sign that says all visitors to this campus must report in through entrance X. And so that tells you, anybody coming onto that campus, okay, I can only get in one way. Of course, every other portal is locked down and they're not getting in. But what that does too is if somebody comes to the campus, and again, school campuses, I mean, people come on the campus they'll come on to walk. They're on there to do some kind of fitness. But again, I think you need to know who's on your campus, and sometimes signage can help you.
Okay.
With those kinds of things. So that's kind of an easy one. I was at a school not too long ago. I was asked to come there and evaluate their program. And one of the first things I do when I'm asked, and I have that opportunity, is I usually arrive 10 or 15 minutes early. And in this particular school, there was the playground was adjacent to, so playground, little kids, very small, is adjacent to the parking lot. So where I pulled at, I come into the parking lot unimpeded. I come off a major road, come into the parking lot, and I just park, and I park right next to that playground. And it's a playground, and it's surrounded with chain link fence. So when I went in and talked to them, I said, you really need to get some privacy screen up around that chain link, or you need to put the privacy slats in through the chain link. Not a big fix, but it's like, I'm thinking somebody who has a bent toward toward being a pedophile, voyeuristic, right, and scoping these little kids out.
Right.
I'm thinking that's, this is easy. This is a no-brainer. This is something you need to do. So, in fact, I went by there the other day, and it's already in place.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. When you said that, I was thinking about, like Mark, I've got young kids, and I've got a 4-year-old and then, a 9-month-old, and the 4-year-old loves to play in the driveway. We're always there watching in our very small, rural neighborhood. But when a car comes by that I've not seen before, I'm watching, I'm paying attention. When you describe the ability to pull right up next to the playground and sit there unchallenged, just, the hair on my arm started to stand up, and I thought, oh my gosh, why would you not? So yeah, no. Oh, wow. Okay.
So not a no cost solution, but very, very, very minimal for the security gain that you get.
Well, and I bet most people that would have an issue with the appearance of guards at their school wouldn't bat an eye at the sudden privacy screen or whatever else on there. Even if they thought about it and realized why it was being put in place, they probably think, well, that's reasonable. That's not confrontational. So yeah, that seems like a great place to start. Things like that.
I don't see what's so intrusive about a guy in khakis and a blue polo tucked in with a flag on his chest. Well, that's a question that our listeners had. For William, take a swing at that, Mark. I mean, you want to ask the question? Yeah, I think it was. Go ahead. I'm not familiar with what the question I was just saying.
Well, no, the question that one of the listeners had put in earlier, and I apologize, I put you on the spot there, but they were saying that they'd like to see uniformed former military personnel stationed at a school as guards, and that uniform could just simply be the khakis and a shirt that says safety team or something like that on it. William, how does that idea settle with you? Is that good? Is that too overt for people? Is it too overt for the sake of you don't necessarily always want your security protocol visible, or is there strength in visibility?
Yeah, I think there can be. I mean, I think again, I think you have to balance deterrence in advance with edging up on looking like a prison or having that institutionalized look.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you just want a balance, and that'll probably look different for different people. I mean, I think it's great. You got a car line at a school, and you have a person who looks like a security person who is looking at every car
mm-hmm.
coming through that driveway and dropping off kids. I mean, I think that's a great thing. And again, people, process, technology.
Mm-hmm.
So the process would be how I route cars in and through that parking lot to enhance security, and then the people part. If you can, again, that you may be able to find a former law enforcement or former military person who could get in some semblance of uniform and be that and enhance your deterrent effect. Again, I think it's just, the creative approaches here are endless, especially when it comes to deterrence. And so I think it's really it's what the market will bear, right? So what's the tolerance for that particular organization regarding deterrence? And again, we've talked about the layers. You brought that up initially in our last segment: deterrence and detection, response. So I think every organization is a little bit different as far as their tolerance towards those kinds of things.
Yeah, and I do want to ask about that layer about response, because it seems like when you're there, when you've finally arrived at response, that event has happened. And for this particular conversation, kind of scoping it back to that active attack type scenario, we had a listener question, and they asked if an attacker, and let's say that attacker is a current student, makes it into the building, what should be done in each classroom once it's obvious that an attack is underway? Not necessarily even just the classroom where that attack is occurring, but in all the other classrooms or all the other rooms of that school, how do you recommend that people respond to that event in that moment?
Well, the first things, and this may seem very elementary, but the first item is that you're in a space that's lockable. So I know on our campus, we have metal door frames, and this is very simple. In fact, a couple of teachers came up with this idea, which was just ingenious. And so the doors are always locked, but there's a flat magnet. There's a little magnet that slides over the recess. So the door, when it closes, it doesn't latch. So kids can come and go. They need to use the restroom without interrupting the class. The teacher having to unlock the door, because they can't get in from the outside. But what happens in a code red drill or in an active killer threat situation, the teacher would move that magnet either up or down, or they could just take it completely off the door frame. And when that door closes, it's locked. And so very simple. So this is like a 30-cent magnet. It's just a flat. You can cut these things out. They come in sheets.
Oh, like magnet tape or whatever, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. They come in sheets, and so they're like 1/8 of an inch thick, and they're about 2 inches wide, and they just fit on the door frame. They slide over the recess, and they just prevent the latch from recessing into the jamb.
Got it. Yeah.
And so what happens is, in a high risk incident or situation, you lose your small motor skills. So if you have to manipulate a device, there's a lot of devices that people have come out to put on doors to, keep an intruder.
Yeah, like the door jams or the cable locks. You have to fish through things or whatever. Yeah, you're just not going to be able to manipulate those devices. So this is something that
It's quick, it's easy, and the condition of the room. To go back to your original question, the condition of the room, the light should be out. If you have a window pane, you should be at a plain view of any window.
Okay.
The noise level should be at 0, and any cell phone should be silenced. So just that should be the condition of each room.
What is your opinion about? Sorry to interrupt. What is your opinion about cell phones in the rooms? My daughter's teacher is strict that she turns her phone off, like off, not muted, off. And I am strict on. I gave you the phone so I can see where you are on the map. I gave you the phone in case of emergencies. You were not to turn your phone off. You were to have your phone muted. And she's like, well, what do I do, Dad? She's 11. She's like, well, what do I do, Dad? My teacher says this, you say that. And I was like, you tell your teacher if there's a problem, she can contact me. But I don't know if, is there a reason or is she just overlooking the reason why I want her to have it on? Do you think?
Again, I think you're talking about a school policy, and I always like to look at school policies and procedures are living. So that means that they're always subject to change, but they're not going to change them unless you give them a good reason to. So I think when it comes to any policy or procedure at a school, like if a parent came to me and said, hey, I just noticed, the visitor check-in procedure here is got some flaws in it. And, have you ever thought about doing this or that or the other? And I would be obligated to consider those things. So I think that that's something that, it's a larger conversation you'd have to have with the teacher body or a principal or assistant principal, because you're concerned that your daughter's not going to be able to contact you if there is a bad incident. Although, here's the thing: you don't want a bunch of people on their cell phones. We've seen out of these incidents. You have students who are videotaping live the incident as it's unfolding.
Right.
And that student has no idea of what their next action should be to save their life or the lives of their classmates because they're too busy videotaping.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because we've had other conversations in the past on other episodes about, is it useful for a person, even in a workplace, say workplace violence unfolds, if you've secured yourself in a room, locked the doors, barricaded the doors, et cetera, is it beneficial for somebody to get on a cell phone and start relaying on the ground live intelligence back to 911 to help the police officers? Is it more important then for the students to be quiet and silent and lights off and down on the floor? Or should somebody, whether it's the teacher or a student, get on the phone and as quietly as possible start trying to relay information back to law enforcement? What are your thoughts there? Or is it just depends? Yeah,
I just think I think that that's a judgment call, and the situation's going to dictate. If they think that they're not in harm's way or they're not in danger, I think that's a great move. They can tell them what room they're in. Here's another thing that I've done is I've put the room numbers of our classrooms in the corners of our windows.
Like exterior windows or interiors?
Exterior windows.
Oh, okay.
Exterior windows. So when SWAT arrives, if the very thing you're talking about, I'm in room 322, responding officers can see that.
Oh, they don't have to have a map, right? They just they look for the number.
There's 322. Well, they'll have a map.
Okay.
They'll have a map. I don't want to discount maps, but how it is. You arrive on scene. If the law enforcement officer has it done now here, I suggest you get any of your local law enforcement there along with your SWAT team to your campus and pay them a visit. If you got to feed them lunch, do it, but get them there, get them familiar with what the inside of your building looks like. but a simple thing is putting visible room numbers on the outside of the windows, and we're talking like little 2-inch letters, 2-inch numbers, and just put them at the you put it at the same place in each of the classrooms, but they're visible from the outside, because if if a tactical assault needs to be conducted, and the room number of the assailant, you don't want them assaulting the wrong room.
That is such a brilliant idea. You can do that with a trip to Lowe's into the mailbox section where they have the numbers. Yeah.
You do that, or you go to your printer and you print out the room numbers, and then you laminate them and you tape them to the windows.
Oh wow, yeah. That's such a great idea. And I think, you're right. Ideally, you want law enforcement to have familiarity with your campus before you need them there. So you would invite them over to do a tour and assessment, et cetera. But if it's the day that, the new guy on the beat is on patrol and he happens to be the one closest to your campus and he's never seen a map, he doesn't know your school, but he's the one that's 30 seconds away, and all he knows is that in room 400 there is an active shooting taking place. All he has to do is run along the outside of that school and look for the number, and there he is. Yeah. That's brilliant. That is so brilliant. Yeah. Okay. And so simple. All right. I guess this is maybe just a yes/no question, because we're really bearing down on the end of our time here, and I want to be respectful of that. First aid. We've mentioned first aid before. It seems like first aid training for teachers and students needs to probably go beyond the basics like CPR, heat stroke, bandaging up a sports injury, et cetera, and into trauma, like stopping the bleeding, tourniquets, chest seals, et cetera. You mentioned earlier about getting students involved and training them on how to use the defibrillator. I got that word right, I think. Defibrillator device. Is teaching students about trauma and stopping the bleeding, is that within the scope of reality? Is that something that you would recommend maybe for older students?
Yeah, exactly. So you're, probably, I would say no less than middle school.
Okay.
It would be, applying a tourniquet is not a bad thing. If I can just give a personal preference, I like the RATS tourniquets.
Okay.
Because they're easy to put on someone else, but they're also easy from a self-application standpoint.
Oh wow.
So if I need to put a tourniquet on myself, RATS is and the acronym is escaping me right now, but RATS.
Okay.
It's really just like a rubber, large rubber band that's fabricated on the outside there's a metal cleat that keeps the tourniquet cinched. So you're not dealing with Velcro and windlasses and all those kinds of things. I mean, I've used a lot of different types of tourniquets, and RATS is probably the easiest, most efficient tourniquet I've ever seen to use on myself and also on other people. So that's just my personal recommendation.
Is it reasonable then to try to get a tourniquet in the desk drawer, or a few tourniquets in the desk drawers of your teachers, and get them some training then?
Yeah, every one of our responders carries them. Yeah.
Okay. Fantastic.
Yep. So, and it's not a bad idea to have a trauma bag or trauma bags located throughout your campus. You would strategically place those just like you do your AEDs. In fact, you could co-locate them with your AEDs, and just maybe have another small wall cabinet and put those in there. And it would just, again, it's tourniquets and bandages, possibly some chest seals. That would be extremely helpful.
Okay. We're officially in overtime, so I'm going to ask a question quickly, and this is an opinion question, William. So if you don't want to answer this one, just say so, and I'll pretend like I never asked it. But so far, these attacks have been done by amateurs, students with a grievance. should we be worried as a society about non-student attacks from people who have trained to do it? Are bad people in the world watching what's going on in America right now, taking note and learning? Do we need to be mindful of that as being a possible future thing, or is that the realm of fantasy?
No, it's definitely not fantasy. I mean, the enemy is among us. I mean, I think we all know that. And I think that's the scenario that you're depicting is always playing in the background. Of course, the unfortunate and sad example of that is Beslan, Russia.
Yes.
And so that was an absolute travesty. And again, I think it's a significant challenge for schools and local law enforcement. I mean, it will be. I don't know. When you talk about schools, school buses, there's so many vulnerabilities. When you come to, again, you start talking about people who are trained or have at least some level of training. It's a whole different. Yeah, it's a whole different ball game, which actually ties into your response. Mm-hmm. So there's three types of responses. There's immediate, rapid, and tactical. So immediate is when you have armed responders on your campus who can respond and neutralize a threat right now. And I think outside of an immediate response, it's going to be a sad situation because let's face it, a rapid response, which is your local law enforcement, and you can ask them, like, how long does it take you to get to our campus? Mm-hmm. And they'll tell you a number. You might want to add a minute or two, but the adage in the environment now is when seconds count, law enforcement's minutes away.
Right.
So I think it's and again, a tactical response from SWAT. I mean, you're talking guys who some are on duty, some are off duty, some could be at the gym. These guys got to come into work. They got to get in a truck. They got to get all their gear. I have a buddy. I'm not going to say what metro city he's in, but he said our average tactical response is about 38 minutes.
Wow. A lot can happen in 38 minutes.
Yeah.
A lot of bad stuff.
And these are short duration, high impact incidents. So less than 5 minutes usually, and it's over.
Oh me. Well, I'll just say this: if you're listening and you're involved in an agency that has prevented that kind of attack done by professionals from happening, or even being planned through to completion in our country, and we don't know about it because it's just been kept out of our eyesight and our earshot, thank you. Please keep doing it. I'm surprised that it hasn't happened yet. Knock on wood. God forbid that it ever does. Mm-hmm. But I know that there are men and women out there in the military and in the law enforcement arena and in the intelligence world that are working tirelessly to make sure it never happens. And we may never know your names, but thank you. Please keep it up. Mark, have you got any thoughts towards the end here before we start to wrap this up with William?
I just had one quick question, and I'm not sure if you have this kind of information or not, but given your position, are you provided with a little bit more intel on some of these more recent shootings regarding causes of death? I mean, do you know if there are bleed outs? Have you come across any of this information? And the second part of the question is, would properly used tourniquets or chest seals or stuff like that have saved lives in any of them, if you've heard any?
That's a great question.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a great question, Mark. So here's the other thing. So just like the tactical response after Columbine, where law enforcement was, they said, we're going to go in a diamond formation. Now, if you're a single responding law enforcement officer, you're going in. You're going in. You're not waiting for a partner. You're not. So that's that's their protocols now. The same thing with EMS. EMS was not going in until the environment was deemed safe. Now that's changing.
Good.
I'm talking to EMS people here in our county, and they're saying, no, we actually, as they're clearing the building, we're going in with them and treating people.
Wow.
So I think as that becomes the norm and that's the new protocol, I think lives will be saved. But no, for sure, people are bleeding out. And for sure,
lockdowns, who knows how long they're just laying there.
Yeah. And so, yeah, exactly.
Well, that's why it's so important that faculty and staff and students even know how to stop bleeding. It seems like there are some wounds that obviously are mortal from the get-go, and that's unfortunate, but let's just be real about it. There are others that are extremity wounds, and we've talked about this in past episodes, Mark, with some of our guests. The global war on terror has taught us a lot about stopping people from dying from extremity wounds through stopping the bleeding. And that's why that's so important that we need that skill in our schools to save lives.
It's probably not too far-fetched to think that every classroom will have a trauma bag in it. And
I would still love to see some wealthy person step up to the plate in every town and buy those for schools and pay for the training for the teachers and staff to get the medical training.
I've said it before. I've said it again. It's one less iPad in each classroom.
Yeah.
There you go.
Oh man.
Yeah.
I hate the fact that we're already at the end of this, and I knew this was going to happen. I knew that we had so much to talk about, and my brain is just running 90 miles an hour. I want to do more. I want to talk about this more, but I know that we've got to be respectful of time, and the listeners are probably, when they see this, I know what's going to happen. They're going to see it on iTunes and others, and they're going to say 2 hours. Oh my gosh. I'm going to have to put a disclaimer at the front of this thing that catches their attention, says it's really worth it. It's packed from start to finish with information that you need to hear. Thank you. That doesn't even seem like it cuts it. I want to thank so many people. I mean, I want to thank the first responders that are going in after these events, and they're not waiting for the shooter to be subdued before they go in and follow behind the men and women with guns.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So many people, the teachers, the educators that are now finding themselves in an arena that they never imagined that they would be in when they went into college thinking, I want to be a teacher. That wasn't supposed to be a dangerous profession, and now they go to work every day with, it's got to be in the back of their minds that it could happen, and if it's not, it should be in the back of their minds so that they're kind of in that condition yellow. But thanks to them too for doing it. William, thanks to you. Golly, I had a thought of where I wanted this conversation to go, and this has surpassed my imagination really. Thank you for coming on and talking to us and for sharing this with our guests.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. Really do. Glad to do it.
Yeah. Normally at this time of the show, we start to kind of draw it down and ask people ask our guests how people can connect with you. I know that we began the episode by explaining why we need to obscure your identity. And it's partially for operational security, but it's also partially because your organization is not in the business of doing this. Are there organizations that you could recommend or just give some clues to what people should look for an organization near them that can help prepare them and their schools for this kind of thing? And if you just want to send me a list, I can put it in our show notes too. But if there's anything off the top of your head that makes sense.
Yeah, I think just generically, and I've mentioned this during the show, your local law enforcement agency, I think they have some tools in their tool bag that could help for sure in the assessment side of things, but they could also help you in your response, the response component. There are some law enforcement agencies now that are actually cataloging campus information regarding schools. I know our county's doing it, and So they have our maps, and when those change, we give them a revised map, but they have all those things, so they can actually pull them up on their computers and inside their cars on the way as they're responding, and actually have the map on their computers. So when you set up a command post and you're establishing incident command during the course of an incident, they already have that information. So they have that. But again, having them literally physically come out to your site, your campus, is just a great idea. I think it's essential.
Well, I want to take a moment then and just reinforce how important I think it is. Parents, students, teachers, please work together. If your school doesn't have a safety program, brainstorm, form that alliance that William was talking about very early on, so that you can go to the leadership or the administration and begin that journey to secure and make safe your school, not against just active shooters or active attackers, but all sorts of emergencies. Law enforcement agencies, if you're a sheriff's deputy, or you're in the administration for your police department, or you're a beat officer, and you know that your department isn't doing what William just described, and reaching out to schools and cataloging that information and coming up with plans proactively, start that conversation in your departments, please. And anything that you can do like that to protect the kids and the teachers and the staff that are in those places, and make those soft targets a little bit harder, is just it's a inch towards winning this problem, or solving this problem. Mark, got anything else before I kind of really tie this thing up?
No, I think we'll save it for next time. I mean, I could go on for hours, but
yeah. Yeah. Well, I know William, I know that we're going to have you back on the subject of church security, and that's maybe similar in some ways, but maybe also different in some significant others. I'm really going to take a detour off, because this is not, I don't generally use this platform to talk about my faith, but if our listeners are just, thinking, how can they support you and partner up with you in some way, I would say that you probably would agree that if they're the Christian praying type, just say a prayer for you guys, and not just for you and the staff and the students, but just continued protection and things like that. Is that a fair request to make?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I figured that you probably wouldn't turn away a good prayer for y'all's behalf. So
pray without ceasing. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Folks, it was a long episode. Thank you for bearing with us. Mark, how do folks connect with you after the show?
As always, info@squaredawaycustoms.com.
Yeah.
Or you can go to the website, squaredawaycustoms.com, if you need any holsters for your carry needs. And don't forget coupon code ShootersNation.
Also, pointing out, just because it's so timely to this conversation, you guys offer a heroes discount for law enforcement, military, and educators, and EMS, right?
Yep. Fire, law enforcement, military, past and present, educators. Yep.
Awesome. Yeah, please do that. Head over to squaredawaycustoms.com, email them, get in with that. And if your school system allows carry, private schools or even public schools that are moving towards that, take advantage of that. Even if they don't, and you're an educator or in one of those other categories, jump in there and take advantage of that. Save yourselves a little bit of money. Special thanks to our Patreon members who are directly supporting the show. You guys are making future episodes like this one possible. If you want to support the show, you can do so. Head over to shootersnation.com/donate. It's not required. We do appreciate it. We want to hear from you guys. We say this every time, and we're getting good ideas sent to us. Thank you all for doing that. shootersnation.com/idea. Tell us what you really want us to talk about on here. Tell us who you want us to interview, what subjects you want us to cover, and we will do our best to make that happen. Those kinds of ideas are coming in on a weekly basis now, and it is exciting. man, Mark, I mean, I'm serious. Like every week we're getting suggestions from the audience asking us, can you cover this? Can you find somebody to talk about this? And it makes our life a lot easier, but we want to talk about the things that you want to hear. Also, shootersnation.com, you can sign up for the Mail Blast mailing list while you're there. That's where we do announcements about upcoming shows, live events, special promotions, etc. That costs you nothing to sign up for it. Please do so. Some cool things that are coming up. Church security, that conversation with William, how to initiate or improve security at your place of worship. Again, there's probably some differences there, probably some similarities. Hope that you'll come back. We've got some unarmed self-defense discussions with Krav Maga martial arts instructors coming up. We have some women's self-defense and gun topics coming up. I've jokingly last time said, no kidding, that's really going to happen. It really is. William was very gracious to shift gears with me this time and record on the subject of school security. So that kind of bumped our schedule on some other things. But, these topics are coming. Trust me. We also want to get into a conversation pretty soon about traveling with your firearm as you go into the summer holiday season, or if you can't travel with your firearm, how else you can make yourself safe and secure wherever you're going and protect yourself and your family. So we're going to be working through that pretty quickly too. Folks, that's it. I don't know. There's no way for me to summarize this tonight. I hope that you found it beneficial. William, thanks again. Your experience, your knowledge, and just your heart to share information with people and make people safer is greatly appreciated. And you probably hear it more than I can imagine. But thank you for your service to our country and all the different roles that you filled in the Navy, as a SEAL, as a bomb technician. I've got to know about that at some point. I want to know how a SEAL comes to the point of saying, I'd like to be a bomb technician. So I'm going to ask you about that at some point. But thank you for being here with us tonight. And my apologies for keeping you out late. But thank you.
Thanks again, David. I appreciate the opportunity.
All right, everybody. That's it for tonight. Hope that you'll join us again for the next one. In the meantime, please do everything you can to be safe out there. We'll talk to you again soon.
The preceding segment was a production of the Shooters Nation podcast. Visit us online at shootersnation.com.